Hello, everybody. Um, I'm Dr. Gary Gomes. I'm here to talk about Vedic astrology, and also I'm going to talk a little bit about Chinese astrology in this broadcast, and also the numerology of 2021. All right, and I'm coming to cable, courtesy of New Bedford Cable News. I'm also on YouTube. Please uh, click on the bell, subscribe. The more subscribers I can get, the more often I can bring this program to you, and I can beef it up a little bit with better production standards and with better equipment and with a more stable environment. So that having been said, I want to talk just a little bit about the year of the ox. I'll um, essentially start from the basic precept of the Chinese zodiac. Essentially, there are 12 major signs in the Chinese zodiac. They cover roughly um, a 12-year period. And essentially, these signs are not the same, although Hindu astrology does have a 60-year cycle that it covers, which is a little bit similar um, to these signs, although it's in a book, um, a major textbook on Vedic astrology, which escapes me now, but I'll start applying those uh, probably next week. And, and essentially, these zodiac signs describe overall characteristics of the year versus um, signs by month. Although there is a system within Indian astrology which uses Su or lunar mansions, similar but not identical to the nakshatras in Vedic astrology for predictive purposes. So essentially, and I'll start off with a general description of the year of the ox, and then I'll bring it to um, more of an indication of what it means for you as individual signs over the next 12 months in the next forecast. So basically, the year of the ox is funded around production and hard work. So, as many of you know, as many of you, unless you've been hiding under a rock somewhere or in a cave, uh, we're currently in a recession. We're currently in a very bad pandemic. It looks like we're showing signs of coming out of it now, which is great. But essentially, the ox is geared more towards um, a conservative approach to life, and is built around hard work, about getting down to brass tacks. It's not built around incitement. It's not built around a desire to change things. It's really aimed at more of a return to a calmer world, a more predictable world, a world in which hard work is rewarded, and a world which is more predictable. At the extreme side of that, so essentially we're talking about fewer riots, fewer um, acting out. On the negative side of that, it can also encourage a certain amount of excessive conservatism. And what I mean by that is excessive suppression, um, pulling back on liberties, pulling back on dissent, pulling back on um, on certain freedoms that we take for granted. Now, this isn't necessarily a criticism or a condemnation of, or or even a political context I'm talking out of. Essentially, what you'll see over the next year is there'll be less uh, interest in shaking things up, more interest in particular, in technological improvements. So we're in the year of a metal ox, and that overall, for certain signs, for certain Chinese astrological signs, That's very good for um, financial growth and work stability and building institutions and stabilizing institutions. So that's going to be the emphasis you see this year. In some ways, it sort of matches what's happening with Saturn and Capricorn in Vedic astrology. So you have institutions which are trying to reestablish or reassert themselves. It's sort of a return to an autocracy, where essentially a place where a station where everybody knows their place and everybody has their place and their function in life. Um, the downside is, it, although it's good for building up financial security and stability, it's not so good for new opportunity. It's not so good for unconventional thinking. It's not so good for thinking outside the box. But it is extremely good for financial growth, um, keeping your nose to the grindstone, working hard. It's not considered the best year for certain zodiac signs, and we'll get into those next week, for people to marry or engage in new relationships. So if you're in a current relationship during this year, unless it's absolutely untenable for you to stay in that particular relationship, it's better to stay during the ox year. And it's usually better for people to stay stable or stay conservative in their grasp. So what you're seeing right now is what I would call increasing conservatism or censorship uh, in media, which I understand, and and decreasing tolerance for disruptive behavior. So I think over the next year in particular, those are the general significations of the year of the ox: recovery, recuperation, building up assets, building up financial stability. Not really a time for new adventures, although they are still possible. And not really the best time to start romantic relationships, but not necessarily um, impossible to start them. That's a general scope. Sign by sign, these will differ. And I want to go from that to uh, the Hindu chart. And I will give you a blow by blow on, and I also want to give you the, the number of the year, which is 5. Okay. So in 2021, the way numerology works is you just add up the numbers. So in 2021, 2 plus 2 plus 1 equals 5. That's how simple numerology is. It's also a combination of a master number, 22, and a prime number, 1. So essentially what that means is there'll be a chance for fame and leadership for those willing to work hard, but there'll also be anxiety or worry about um, free communications, because 5 is a Mercury number, and there'll also be a lot of controls being put on people, because 22 is a control number. It's a master number, but it's a control number, and 1 is also kind of a dictatorial number. So there'll be a lot of push for um, filling a void in leadership, for making sure that the leaders actually um, stay stable and stay secure and don't take too many chances. It's sort of a slow moving year. The ox is a powerful animal, but it's not like a horse year would be, where things happen quickly, or a dragon year where things happen flamboyantly, um, or a rat year where things, which we just came through, where things happen quickly, but kind of they upset everything. And it's more intended towards consolidation, building structure, even at the expense of innovation, although there will be technological innovation. There'll be refinement of technology. And so essentially what you'll see is a lot of closing of gaps, or or closing of conversations. So you're not going to see, let's say, a free exchange of ideas like you would in another year. Um, and to me, that's neither good nor bad. That's sort of like the natural cycle of things. Okay, but don't be surprised. We see there will be a lot of investigation of social media, mainly because of the power they have, and you will also see a lot of examination of government and ways to make government more secure and less risk oriented. So, like I said, there are good and bad sides to these phenomena. Um, I think the social media, I think the good sides of that is you will see more accountability in social media. However, you will also see more control or more restrictions in social media. On the other hand, you'll also have government continuing to take a look at social media, but nothing really dramatic will happen until after this particular year, not until February of 2023. The other thing to look at, this is a communication year, 2 plus 2, so it's a 5 year, and there will be a lot of bungled communications and a lot of misunderstandings. We're in a Mercury retrograde period right now. That's a little bit difficult to get through, but it's not horrible. And you're going to start to see a lot of people trying to communicate more effectively over the next year. So that's a good sign. But I'll get more to the predictions. Uh, Communist China was formed during an ox year, if I recall correctly. Um, and so the Communist Chinese government is almost an example of an ox kind of a government, where essentially it's very tight control, very um, unidirectional kind of a government that doesn't allow a lot of dissent, doesn't allow a lot of free speech, um, and so so that's not to just pick on the Chinese, but that's one government that I know was formed in that particular year. Okay, so I'm going to go to the chart for right now when we're speaking, and I'll incorporate a couple of outer planets just for my friends in the Western astrology community to take a look at. And we're going to go to a now chart. We're going to set this up for New Bedford, Mass. So it's around 4:30 is February 17th, 2021. The sun's in my favorite sign, Aquarius, in Vedic astrology. And I'll change this layout pattern. This is the layout pattern for an annual chart, which I will talk about in an upcoming lecture. All right, so as we're talking right now is the rising sign is Cancer, and we have a lot of planets in the 7th house. You see that right here? Okay, so what does that mean? Well, the moon is in the same sign with Mars, so that gives a lot of energy to us today. So that's good. That's actually a good thing. The moon is waxing, and you'll start to see a lot of activity over the next week or so. So this past week, or this past month overall, has been kind of sluggish and kind of upset and kind of angry. And you've seen some of that anger actually cross over the past couple of days. We've seen the back and forth between various members in our own party, and also I've seen broadcasts from overseas where certain governments like Myanmar they're engaging in protests, and I don't think we're going to see that go away anytime soon. But basically, that Moon Mars conjunction gets people riled up. Now they'll get a little bit more riled up over the next couple of days. So right now, the moon is at roughly 15 degrees of Aries. It's in a nakshatra called Bharani nakshatra. It'll move into Rohini nakshatra fairly soon, and then it'll go into Taurus. It'll be in the same sign with Rahu over the next few days. So you're going to see a little bit of financial panic and upset over the next few days, and a lot of anxiety. Now, one of the things that's causing, or one of the things that caused governmental anxiety over the past month and a half was mainly because the sun was clustered with this bunch of planets, with Saturn, Jupiter, retrograde Mercury, our friend Pluto, who's a Western astrology edition, and Venus. So essentially what that means in plain English is Saturn is dominating this entire combination of charts. Saturn gives anxiety, worry over security. Venus makes us happiest when we're safe in the sign. Jupiter makes us wisest when we're safe in this sign. Mercury makes us communicate badly in this sign because it's going retrograde. And it's essentially a very defensive posture, what you're looking at right now. The moon is in the same sign with Uranus and Mars. And the moon Uranus conjunction actually happened just about half a day ago. And so that gave some changes, some concerns to people about their mental state, their anxiety level. You probably saw a lot of people getting very, very upset. A lot of shifts in activity in government. And essentially, what that does to the person's mental state is it gets them ready for new changes or new directions. And this particular combination is going to last in this particular sign for about another 4 or 5 years. So essentially, when Uranus moves is in this sign, that's essentially the kind of thing that makes social disorder. So we experienced it this past summertime. We experienced it just recently in January. So we're not going to see those things go away anytime soon. We will, however, see them slow down, I would say, especially after April and throughout the summer months, but then pop up again in September. And the reason I'm saying that is because Jupiter will move back into the sign in September, around September 15th. Right now, the sun has moved out of Capricorn, so things are a little bit, quote unquote, more return to normal. There's more interest in getting things done, more interest in helping the people, but also more interest in maintaining privilege for a few. So the sun is in Aquarius. It's essentially Aquarius in Vedic astrology is sort of like the elite thinkers. It's not really revolutionary. It's more the elite thinkers or more the elite workers. And Capricorn is more the established order. So this has been a concerted effort to return us to the established order over the past year or so. And that'll last for about another year and a half, and then Saturn will go to Aquarius, and that'll cause another disruptive period for the country. But overall, at least from the chart, we have, so the moon is well placed, is going to be waxing really for the next 10 days or so. So over the next few days, so we're talking about 18th, 19th, 20th, it'll be a little bit panicky or a little bit fraught. People will be a little bit fraught. However, it'll also be a financial opportunity day because the yogi point being here, and I haven't spoken about the yogi point, but the yogi point is like a fortunate or a money-making point in the chart. So essentially, whenever you see that YP in your birth chart, that's a potential for you to make money. The other thing is when you have, and I'll talk about these various attributes of Vedic astrology as I get to more frequent videos. But basically, Rahu is making us a little bit afraid of losing money because it's right on top of the yogi point. It is giving a little bit of a net of illusion connected with financial investments, but it should mean financial investments should improve, at least for the foreseeable future. And overall, from the chart, um, this is not a bad chart, but that cluster of planets in Capricorn is always a little bit dangerous, um, mainly because it causes changes in governments. Excuse me. So K2 in Scorpio, not a bad placement. K2 is at home there. Rahu is at home in Taurus, but that usually means the civilization gets more acquisitive or um, gets a little more greedy. And K2 in Scorpio means the society gets a little more secretive. So, so, so those are essentials we're looking at. If we're looking at um, maps of the world, let me leave one thing here. And Mercury will turn direct within a week, so communication problems should be abated somewhat. The other planet I just wanted to bring your attention to, and I haven't spoken about this too much, is Neptune. And Neptune's at 25 degrees of Aquarius in the Vedic chart. Now, like I said, I normally don't use these, mainly because I think they're useful for world events, but not particularly useful for individual readings. And I have seen K2 and Rahu do a lot of the same things, but it's just easier to translate to people who are interested in these particular planets. Neptune's with the sun, so the government's in kind of like an illusory stage right now. They think everything's fine. They think everything's smooth, and it's really not. Um, but that's the impression. It's sort of an idealistic or kind of a dreamy state. And I'm not trying to worry anybody. That's not the idea of me saying this. I am trying to alert you, though, that um, at least from this combination right here, the Sun Neptune combination, the government's still a little bit unstable. Governments around the world are still a little bit unstable. This combination down here does the same thing, to be honest with you. But that Sun Neptune, there's an illusion of control right now. There's an illusion that things are going to go smoothly. And it's not necessarily incorrect, but it's an illusion because Neptune deals in illusion, it deals with intoxication, it deals with, um, it can even deal with intoxication of power, to be honest with you. So, so, so essentially, right now, when you have a combination like this, it's a little bit, we're kind of like lulling ourselves into a sense of false security. It doesn't mean anything dramatically bad is going to happen. So I just want to put people's minds at rest with that. But usually there are air traffic problems when the sun is in Aquarius. It's an air sign, and they're usually dangerous to flights. So that pattern will continue through around March 15th. If we want to look at the world map and see where the planets are, well, let's make this bigger. So because we have that cluster of planets in Capricorn, these planets are going to be really uh, segmented in one place. So you see Saturn, Venus, Jupiter, Saturn, Mercury, Jupiter, Venus, and Sun lines are all close to each other. And that makes sense because, and if you look over here, you'll see they're right over Japan. And I mentioned online that I predicted some problems for Japan, um, some geographical problems for Japan, and we had an earthquake. And this part of the world is still sort of subject to those kinds of problems. Um, and especially since we have a Mars line moving right up here. You can barely see it, but it is there. And you have a moon line moving all the way through China. So China looks like it's particularly vulnerable right now. Myanmar is over here. So Myanmar is like right on the moon line and right next to a Mars line. So essentially, that government still looks unstable to me. It doesn't mean it's going to collapse, that military coup is going to collapse. But I would expect to see, because we have a Venus, Jupiter, debilitated Jupiter, and Mercury line running through Korea, and also a Saturn line running through eastern China up into eastern Russia and into the Aleutian Islands. We have a Rahu line going as well. And Rahu line is going through Madagascar, just a little bit to the west of India and close to Iran. Those parts of the world are going to have some problems. So the Rahu line is close to Delhi. I think that's what's causing a lot of that's the planetary explanation for the demonstrations in India right now. If we go over here, you'll see a Mars line um, going through the Middle East, roughly through the Middle East, but more through Syria and into Russia and Saudi Arabia. And also there's a Mars, and I have to move this a little bit. Sorry, folks. There's a Mars and Sun line, so it indicates trouble with the government in Saudi Arabia and also in Russia. Turkey has a moon line, so does most of Eastern Europe going through it, and so does Egypt down to South Africa, excuse me. And you have a Jupiter line going through Greece, Mercury line going through Greece and Central Europe, and a Saturn line going through Germany and the Netherlands. Now, there have been some problems um, with the spread of the coronavirus vaccine in Europe. I think these lines are representing that. This part, the European Union isn't doing so well lately in terms of fighting the epidemic, or the pandemic, excuse me. And I think that's where you're going to see those problems. There's going to be anxiety in Turkey, but not and anger, but not really, and maybe a little bit of violence and maybe a little bit of earth activity, but it's more towards Ankara area, maybe even a little bit east of that. There's let me see if I can get this out of the way. There's and it's a moon line running through Istanbul, or close to Istanbul in Bulgaria. And essentially what moon lines do, moon is with Mars, so that's going to give some violence or disruption to Istanbul. It does not necessarily mean an earthquake. Okay, so I have to be clear about that. There's a Mars line passing through eastern United States, a moon line passing through Washington, D.C. So Washington's still going to be kind of a mess politically. Mercury line going through close to where I am. Moon Mercury line going close to where I am. This is Connecticut, Rhode Island. And there'll be a Saturn line running right through Brazil. And this is Sun line running right through Brazil. And the Rahu line running right through Brazil. So Brazil's in comparatively rough shape in terms of panic, in terms of government not being effective, in terms of societal pressure. It doesn't necessarily mean it's going to stay that way for a long time. And so there's a moon line running roughly through Peru, Venezuela, and through Haiti and the Dominican Republic. And also, looks like a Saturn line. No, it's not a Saturn line. What is it? It's yes, a descendant Saturn line running through um, Uruguay, Paraguay, um, and Argentina. So that looks a little bit difficult for South America. Mexico is largely untouched. The western United States is largely untouched. There's a Rahu line running through Hawaii, so we can. Oh, I'm sorry, it's not Hawaii. Um, there's a Saturn and Mercury and Jupiter line running through Hawaii, and that should indicate those islands may have a little bit of trouble. Um, and I think it's mainly because of air traffic issues or even tidal issues. But there should be a little bit of violence or a little bit of activity in Turkey and throughout most of North Africa. And those are what I would identify as the pivotal slots. Australia is largely untouched, except for a Jupiter line in the far west, and that to me doesn't seem like it's going to do very much. But the areas I'm most worried about are Japan, Korea, China, uh, definitely Southeast Asia, what was called in the French Indochina years ago, and definitely Western India and up through the Soviet Union. A little bit of concern about Turkey because of the Mars lines there. That can indicate some problems with violence. Um, Possibly earthquakes, but that's a little bit, I think that's a little bit of a stretch. And the other parts that I'm worried about are Eastern United States, Brazil, and South America. Um, Central Europe, I'm not seeing it as being a big problem. This looks like a temporary problem, a relatively low uh, impact problem, but I'm sure it's going to be significant to them as they're facing issues with the virus because it looks like there are communications and supply problems for them. So that'll continue for about another couple of weeks, and we'll see some changes to the birth chart starting in Venus is at 26 degrees. So starting in about 4 days, Venus is going to move out of that sign, and that'll take some pressure off it. Within about 20 days, Mercury will come out of it. So essentially, we're going to be back to just Jupiter and Saturn in Capricorn, which will still be impressive, but not as um, much of a mess as it is right now. And for those um, who have annual charts or who have birth charts or birthdays, um, Aries, a lot of emphasis on home life, a lot of emphasis on career life, a lot of emphasis on money for them over the next couple of weeks. Um, Also, some interest in romantic relationships, but almost too much responsibility connected with work for them to get serious about that. Also, they should be a little bit careful about actions. So this is essentially April 15th to May 15th. Taurus, May 15th to June 15th. We have Rahu in the first house, Moon and Mars in the 12th house, so they should be careful about damage to their property or about damage to their relationship partners. Okay, so their relationship life may be a little bit scrambled, a little bit difficult to deal with over the next couple of weeks. Career-wise, they're doing fine. So their career-wise, as a matter of fact, is one of the strongest signs in the chart, but relationship-wise, not so great. For Gemini, as June 16th to July 16th, we have no planets in the seventh house, no significant planets in the seventh house, a lot of planets in the eighth house, which means additional focus on financial gains, additional focus on financial gains to the spouse, new friendships with fights with friends, and additional expenses. And they have to watch out also for minor health issues. For those born July 15th through August 15th, as Cancer, a lot of focus on relationship life, a lot of focus on children, children having diseases or getting ill, and Sun being in the 8th house, worry about expenditures or worried about financial gains. For Leo, the Sun's in the 7th house, so a lot of focus on relationship life, good potential for them in relationship matters. A lot of focus, but again, a lot of enemies at work, a lot of enemies, a lot of focus on work, but a lot of enemies, a lot of obstructions at work, and a lot of disruption in home life. For Virgo, Virgo has a lot of courage, a lot of bravery, potential love affairs for this particular sign. But again, their health will be a little bit weighed down, a little bit obstructed, and they'll also face anger from relationship partners. But they'll also be interested in foreign countries and foreign lands. For Libra, Moon and Mars fights with the relationship partners, maybe separation, maybe new relationship partners coming in. Mars, Lord of the 7th house, is second house is in the 7th house, which means money from relationship partners. 4th house, a lot of stress at home, a lot of anger at home. Sun is in the 5th house, a lot of focus on career and creativity for the sign. So it's not a bad placement for them. But again, they have to watch out for fights and for losing their temper. For Scorpio, Scorpio has Ketu in the 1st house, Rahu in the 7th house. This is November 15th to December 15th. This particular sign will have some enemies on the job front, some jealousy on the job front, but they'll have a lot of work focus, and they'll also have a lot of courage and daring and new ambitions for this particular sign. Also, home life will be a little bit stressful, and there's always some underlying dissatisfaction with relationship life, although it's good for money for a relationship partner for Scorpio. Sagittarius has a good focus on financial gains, good energy for taking chances, some problems or arguments with children, some anxiety over health issues, and overall good career life. Capricorn has all these planets in the 1st house, so this sign has to watch out for feeling a little bit depressed or a little bit overwhelmed. Anybody who has a lot of planets in Capricorn, they'll know they're not feeling very happy right now, or they're feeling a little bit up and down. It's sort of like a manic depressive period for them. And the Sun's in the 2nd house, so there's going to be a lot of financial gain for them. Mars is in the 4th, a lot of fighting at home. Rahu in the 5th, a lot of greedy kids, and Ketu in the 11th, success through friends. Aquarius has the Sun in the 1st house, but a lot of planets in the 12th. So this essentially means this sign, although it's not in bad shape, essentially a lot of its resources will be behind the scenes. It's not going to be living a very public life for at least another 2 weeks, at least another 3 weeks, excuse me. And you'll start to see it starting to slowly come out of a shell within about 4 or 5 days, and you'll start to see it becoming more and more popular and more social. But a lot of courage for the sign, a lot of uncertainty about what it wants. So Rahu's in the 4th house, gives a lot of dissatisfaction with home life, and Ketu's in the 10th house, so some uncertainty about career life. Finally, Pisces is in, it has a lot of planets in the 11th house, so it does mean financial gains for the sign. Career life looks favorable, financial gains through career life. Although arguments about money, Rahu's in the 3rd. This will be true for a lot of signs until really about 10 days from now. and Rahu's in the third house, so a lot of ambition for this sign. So although it's not a bad career chart, it is difficult in terms of personal happiness and domestic bliss. So that's it for all the signs. Remember, you can contact me for readings at 508-525-0001. I can do individual horoscopes. I do parties. I teach astrology. I'm teaching at Kepler College, also the American College of Vedic Astrology, and I teach independently and am in the process of setting up a formal school. If you have any questions about astrology, you can contact me. My email information is at the end of this video, neivas@comcast.net. Remember to, if you're watching this on YouTube, remember to subscribe. Send it out to other people who might be interested in this, because I'm trying to grow the base so we can reach more people and spread good, reliable astrology. That's about it for me this week. Thanks very much for watching. I appreciate it. And as always, you're the most important thing to me. Namaste. Gary Gomes signing off.